Stay true to sharing insights, exploring great books worldwide. Hi there, this is Sally with Book Insights. Today we're diving into a classic work by Hannah Arendt, the renowned Jewish political philosopher. Eichmann in Jerusalem, subtitle, A Report on the Banality of Evil. In 1961, a globally watched trial took place in Jerusalem, with Nazi Germany official Adolf Eichmann as the defendant. During World War II, Nazi Germany massacred over 6 million Jews, and Eichmann was a key player in this genocide. After World War II, Eichmann fled to Argentina. In 1960, Israel's Mossad intelligence agency tracked him down, secretly abducted him to Israel, and put him on trial in Jerusalem in 1961. The book's author, Hannah Arendt, volunteered to the New Yorker magazine to cover the trial.
Arendt was born in Germany and is one of the 20th century's top political philosophers, famous for her work on totalitarianism. Boston was in the Equist.
Her masterpieces, like The Origins of Totalitarianism, The Human Condition, and On Revolution, are classics in modern political philosophy. During World War II, Arendt was forced to move to the U.S. because she was Jewish. During Eichmann's trial, she was a professor at Princeton, and her roles as a political philosopher and Holocaust witness made her feel she had to be there. She really wanted to know what Eichmann was thinking when he took part in the massacre. About this trial, Arendt wrote 5 articles for The New Yorker, later compiling them into the book Eichmann in Jerusalem. In the book, many of Arendt's ideas sparked fierce debates, with the biggest being the banality of evil. This concept,
Simply put, Arendt thought Eichmann wasn't some evil monster. He was just a dutiful bureaucrat who blindly followed orders without thinking, committing crimes out of mediocrity. That's the banality of evil.
Arendt's shocking view caused heated debates among American and European intellectuals as soon as it came out. Most Jewish readers were furious, thinking she ignored facts and was trying to clear Eichmann's name. But so was Arendt trying to exonerate Eichmann? What exactly is this book about? This is what I'm going to explain to you today. I'll break it down into 3 aspects. First, how the trial of the Eichmann case was conducted. Second, why does Eichmann's behavior represent the banality of evil? Third, why did this book spark such huge controversy? All right, for the first aspect, let's look at how the trial of the Eichmann case was conducted. On April 11th, 1961, the Jerusalem court began the trial of Eichmann. The trial lasted for 4 months, adjourned in August, and resumed in December of the same year for the final verdict. 3 judges came from Germany, and the prosecution was led by Israeli Attorney General Hausner. Eichmann's defense lawyer was German Servatius, who was also part of the defense team in the Nuremberg trials. Over hundreds of prosecution witnesses testified during the 4-month trial. Journalists from all over the world flocked to witness this globally watched trial. On the opening day, Arendt saw this legendary executioner in the audience. He was of medium height, slim build, in his 40s or 50s, with a partially bald forehead, poor teeth, nearsighted, and a scrawny neck. Throughout the trial, he sat in a glass booth, always leaning his neck towards the judge's bench, but never facing the audience. He was charged with 15 crimes, including complicity in anti-Semitism, crimes against humanity, murder, and war crimes during the Nazi era, especially in World War II. A key focus of the trial debate was the role Eichmann played in the Holocaust.
Did he actually commit murder?
In other words, did he personally kill anyone or directly order the killing of Jews? Additionally, they needed to prove that he had a motive for killing. For example, whether he hated Jews, lacked conscience, or was a brutal demon, all of which would affect Eichmann's conviction. Eichmann himself denied all 15 charges. In court, he stated, "I haven't done anything related to killing Jews, and I've never killed a single Jew. In short, I've never killed anyone, and I've never ordered anyone to be killed." Arendt observed that Eichmann had poor memory and unclear logic. He couldn't recall the sequence of events, and even forgot key details of important incidents. For example, at the Wannsee Conference, How did the Nazis discuss the massacre of Jews? Eichmann claimed he couldn't remember, but he remembered every tiny so-called achievement in his career perfectly. For instance, he clearly recalled how Heydrich, known as the Nazi devil in Prague, showed him a more humane side. He also remembered that when news of Heydrich's assassination arrived, he and his companions were playing bowling. Like, how were the drinks served? When judges questioned him, he often talked about his life and career with self-satisfaction. When the prosecution tried to find Eichmann's motive for killing, his answers were also unacceptable. During one court interrogation, the prosecution questioned Eichmann about whether he participated in transporting 1 million Jews using 10,000 trucks in 1944. Someone asked him, "During your discussions with your superiors about this, did you ever express sympathy? Did you ever consider rescuing Jews?" Eichmann calmly replied, "When initiating the transport operations, I didn't express sympathy, not because I was cruel, but because I was entirely focused on internal department conflicts and had no time for sympathy." Because Eichmann had always handled Jewish transport, but in that operation, his superior Himmler assigned it to an outsider, making Eichmann cooperate, which infuriated him. So he devised a way to regain control. Just like that, Eichmann framed his complicity in murder as an internal power struggle. As for what would make him feel guilty, Eichmann said he clearly remembered only feeling guilty when he failed to fulfill his duties. And his duty was meticulously transporting millions of Jews to concentration camps. Hearing this, some thought Eichmann had no conscience and was insane. However, the court invited 6 psychologists to examine him. The experts unanimously testified that Eichmann was completely normal. One expert stated that Eichmann's attitude toward family and friends was not only normal but commendable. Ultimately, the prosecution couldn't find direct evidence of Eichmann killing anyone, nor could they establish his murder motive. He appeared neither particularly hateful toward Jews nor inherently cruel. In Arendt's own words, everyone could see that Eichmann was no monster. The defense further argued that under the Nazi legal system at the time, Eichmann hadn't done anything wrong. You accuse him of murdering Jews, committing war crimes, etc. But that was Nazi Germany's state action, not Eichmann's personal conduct. He was just following orders, and all this made Arendt ponder deeply. So did this ordinary-looking, diligent man actually bear guilt? Was it really, as Eichmann claimed, that he never killed anyone personally nor issued kill orders? So does that mean he was innocent? It was in this context that Arendt proposed her famous concept, the banality of evil. Now let's address the second question. What is the banality of evil? Why does Eichmann's behavior exemplify the banality of evil? Actually, the term banality of evil appears only once on the book's final page, but the concept permeates the entire work. Arendt believed evil manifests in 2 forms: radical evil displayed by totalitarian rulers. For example, Hitler as ruler possessed absolute power to demand obedience. Thus, when rulers like Hitler decided to massacre Jews, they actively chose evil based on their own will. The other evil belongs to the ruled, the evil committed by lower-level participants, the banality of evil. This refers to those under ideological rule who, lacking independent thought and blindly obeying orders, commit atrocities. Eichmann was precisely such an unthinking bureaucrat, neither architect nor strategist of the Holocaust, just following orders. So how did Eichmann embody the banality of evil according to Arendt? First, Eichmann wasn't a fanatical anti-Semite. He got involved through unemployment, randomly taking a job. Eichmann was born in 1906 to a German middle-class family. As eldest son, he performed poorly academically, the only one of 5 children not finishing high school. Later at vocational school, he still couldn't graduate normally. His father thought he was a hopeless child. In his early 20s, Eichmann still had no stable job, with no future prospects. In 1932, seeing how down and out he was, a friend of his father introduced him to the Nazi Party, and he became an SS soldier. In 1934, Eichmann successfully applied to the Nazi Party's security service. becoming a civil servant there. This agency's main task was to monitor party members and also served as the intelligence branch of the Gestapo. But when Eichmann first joined, he had no clue what this unit actually did. His first assignment at the SD was to compile information on all Freemason members. The Freemasons are a secret organization founded in the 18th century with religious overtones. In early Nazi ideology, they believed Freemasonry might be connected to Judaism. However, Eichmann was disappointed. He found the job boring. A few months later, he was transferred to the department handling Jewish affairs, his first exposure to Jewish matters. This shows Eichmann was simply transferred to Jewish affairs through routine bureaucratic reassignment. Like many Germans then, he had no idea how things would develop. Later in his testimony, Eichmann mentioned his stepmother's cousin's wife was Jewish. This nominal uncle had used Jewish connections to get him a sales job. He felt grateful to this uncle and his daughter. During the war, this uncle asked Eichmann for help getting a Swiss emigration permit, which Eichmann provided, and later assisted him further. Eichmann also helped another Jewish couple using these examples to show he bore no personal hatred. This is the second manifestation. The banality in Eichmann was his lack of independent thought and blind obedience while serving the Nazis. Now, let's see how Eichmann gradually became a crucial cog in the Holocaust machinery. When Eichmann was first transferred to Jewish affairs, Nazis were still debating how to handle German Jews. I know that his superior then instructed him to study Zionism, which led Eichmann to ideologically favor it, meaning using political means to expel Jewish immigrants from Germany to establish their own state. Later, Eichmann was promoted to lieutenant due to his outstanding work in Jewish affairs. In 1938, he was sent to Vienna, Austria's capital, to organize the forced deportation of Jewish immigrants. Austria had been annexed by Germany, and Eichmann felt excited about this important assignment. Expelling Jews also aligned with his Zionist beliefs. So he gladly accepted and performed this job exceptionally well. In just 8 months, he expelled 45,000 Jews from Austria. Within less than a year and a half, he expelled about 150,000 Jews, 60% of Austria's Jewish population. How did he achieve this? Arendt noted that during this mission, Eichmann first discovered his talent for organization and negotiation. After receiving the assignment, he first sought cooperation with Austrian Jewish leaders. Many prominent Jews were imprisoned at the time. Eichmann secured their release to persuade others to leave Austria. But for countries to accept Jewish immigrants, they needed money. So Eichmann sent Jewish leaders to international organizations to raise funds. Donated foreign currency was sold to wealthy Jews. For example, $1 USD, market value 4.2 marks, was sold for 10 to 12 marks. The profit subsidized poor Jews' emigration expenses. But as the war progressed, Nazis realized expelling all Jews from occupied territories was increasingly difficult. In September 1939, Eichmann was transferred to Berlin as head of the Central Office for Jewish Emigration. Though a promotion, he felt frustrated because the office might soon close, risking his job. Facing this, Eichmann proactively sought ways to continue emigration operations. He proposed establishing a Jewish autonomous zone in Poland and personally inspected the Polish-Soviet border. Until then, Eichmann still worked to secure land for Jews. Of course, he had ulterior motives. He hoped to become governor once the autonomous zone was established, but this plan quickly fell apart. In 1941, after Germany attacked the Soviet Union, one day Eichmann was summoned to the office of Reinhard Heydrich, the national leader of the SS. Heydrich told him that the Führer ordered the physical extermination of Jews with the official code name Final Solution, and the task was assigned to the Economic Administrative Main Office. In other words, Eichmann's emigration office was no longer in charge of Jewish affairs. Upon hearing this news, Eichmann said he was initially confused, but later realized that physical extermination meant direct slaughter of Jews. Probably because this decision shocked him deeply. In court, Eichmann could still recall his feelings when he heard this decision. He said, "I never thought of such a violent solution. Now I have nothing left, lost the joy of work, can't be proactive, I'm almost emptied." By the time of the Wannsee Conference in 1942, Eichmann understood that the massacre was irreversible. The purpose of this conference was to coordinate various Nazi departments to jointly implement the extermination plan. Eichmann saw and heard all high-ranking officials present, endorsing this plan. Not only Hitler and Heydrich, but also all bureaucratic elites, and even the Pope spoke, eagerly competing for command of this bloody task. Eichmann said that before attending the Wannsee Conference, he still had doubts about violently solving the Jewish question. But at that moment, he no longer felt guilty. He thought no one could judge him because all these excellent and outstanding people approved. So how could he stand up and say no? After that, everything became straightforward. Everyone carried out their tasks step by step. As a former immigration expert, Eichmann's most important task in this plan was transporting Jews to Auschwitz concentration camp. He first calculated the population capacity per train car, reported the numbers to Jewish leaders, who then submitted passenger lists to him. Then Jewish passengers arrived at assembly points and boarded the death trains that took them to the concentration camps. So when Eichmann personally sent Jews onto the trains, watching them go to their deaths, did he ever protest or refuse to carry out the task? In fact, Eichmann not only didn't refuse, but also acted very enthusiastically. In 1944, Eichmann was stationed in Hungary, responsible for transporting Hungarian Jews to concentration camps, and his work was super efficient. In less than 2 months, he used 147 trains to ship 430,000 people to Auschwitz concentration camp. In Hungary, Eichmann had a colleague named Becker, an SS officer, who made deals with wealthy Hungarian Jews, helping them immigrate in exchange for huge financial rewards. At that time, such deals were tacitly approved by the Nazis. Himmler had tried in 1942 to sell exit permits to Slovak Jews, using the money to expand the SS. These transactions really ticked Eichmann off. He thought they were dirty deals and serious corruption. To keep carrying out the Führer's orders, Eichmann even defied his boss Himmler's commands. In the war's late stages, some SS members realized it might end. They ramped up money grabbing while playing moderates to dodge blame after the war. Himmler, unusually, went behind Hitler's back to order an end to the extermination actions at Auschwitz. Eichmann was really mad about this, because in his view, the Führer's words had legal power, and Himmler doing this was illegal. So he boldly defied orders, demanding the ghettos stay as they were and pushing hard to see the massacre plan through. That's the whole story of Eichmann's involvement in the massacre of Jews. In his testimony, he kept stressing that when he joined the Nazi Party, he had no hatred for Jews, and his transfer to transport work was just a routine job switch. Later changes in the situation were out of his control. While sending Jews to concentration camps, he never thought to make decisions himself. His mind was all about organizational management, and sometimes he got caught up in power struggles between authorities. All he did was absolutely obey the Führer's orders and stick to the law. But Arendt believed the Jerusalem trial of Eichmann revealed a new type of violent murderer. People like Eichmann might not be extremely cruel, but they lack empathy, blindly follow orders at work, and have no independent thinking. That's their banality. It's precisely this banality that let them commit such crimes against humanity. This is the banality of evil as defined by Arendt. The trial of Eichmann raised a serious question. We all live in groups, have superiors, and must obey orders. When those orders go against your conscience, what would you do? If people commit crimes by obeying orders, can they get away with it and avoid punishment? The Jerusalem court gave an answer to this question. No, the judiciary does not absolve a defendant of guilt just because they were following orders. The court believes that obeying orders is not an excuse to avoid guilt. A person cannot claim to be like a robot without autonomy. They have a conscience. a person should use their own conscience to judge right from wrong. The court judged Eichmann based on his actual actions, not on whether he intended to commit a crime in his heart. Since Eichmann supported and executed the policy of massacring Jews, he was guilty. Moreover, Eichmann actually had the right to request to leave his position. As we mentioned earlier in a book called The Nazi Doctors, during the Nazi regime, many people chose to leave government positions after learning about the massacre plans, and there are no records showing that those who left faced severe punishment. Eichmann could have done the same, but Arendt believed that this choice itself implied acquiescence to Nazi atrocities, and Eichmann's defense didn't save him. On December 15, 1961, Eichmann was sentenced to death. All right, that's the content about the banality of evil. Over the past 60 years, controversies about this book and Arendt herself have never stopped. So why did this book cause huge controversy? This is the last issue we'll discuss today. The first controversy about Arendt is that some believe she proposed the banality of evil to exonerate Eichmann, making her seem pro-Eichmann. A core insight Arendt expressed in this book is that Eichmann did not commit crimes out of hatred for Jews or a cruel nature. She believed Eichmann's guilt lay in his lack of thinking, which prevented him from judging right and wrong or understanding issues from the victim's perspective. He only obeyed. This view angered Jews in Europe and America, who didn't want to believe that Eichmann, a mass murderer of heinous crimes, was no different from you and me, just following the leader step by step. This suggests that even ordinary people like us harbor seeds of extreme cruelty within. This idea terrifies people. In the book's introduction, Israeli journalist Amos Elon describes how speakers flocked from Israel and the UK, accusing Arendt of being a self-hating Jew and calling the book pro-Eichmann propaganda. And some organized scholars to scrutinize Arendt's text meticulously, trying to find errors to devalue her work. Did France's Le Nouvel Observateur weekly published an article questioning if Arendt was a Nazi? In response, Arendt stated in the book's postscript that when she called Eichmann's evil banal, she was just describing his actions factually. Moreover, she believed Eichmann was guilty. She agreed with the court's verdict that only a massive bureaucratic machine could carry out genocide. But if it's a crime, every cog in that machine, no matter how small, becomes a perpetrator in court. In other words, we must see Eichmann as a person with autonomous will and criminal capacity, not as he claimed, just doing his job. The court judges a person, not a position. But the second controversy against Arendt is fiercer. People think she not only tried to exonerate Eichmann, but also shifted Holocaust guilt onto the victims, the Jewish people. This is because Arendt devoted much of the book to condemning Jewish councils in Germany and Poland for cooperating with the Nazis to complete the Holocaust. Earlier, we mentioned Eichmann sent Jewish leaders to raise funds, and Jewish councils assisted in managing transport to concentration camps. Therefore, Arendt argued that with Jewish council leaders' active help, the Nazis could efficiently gather Jews and transport them to camps. She wrote that without organization or leadership, the Jewish people would have been chaotic and horrific. But then the victim count wouldn't have reached 4.5 to 6 million. So he believed the leaders in the Jewish councils failed to see through the Nazis' conspiracy, futilely thinking that if they cooperated, the Nazis might spare them, but inevitably became accomplices and enabling the Nazis to exterminate Jews to the maximum extent with minimal administrative and financial costs. This accusation naturally enraged the entire Jewish community. Even some of Arendt's longtime friends cut ties with her permanently. Amos Elon pointed out in the introduction that criticisms of Jewish councils as Nazi accomplices had been heard before, but what stood out about Arendt was her persistently provocative tone. The Jewish community leadership stubbornly questioned whether they had any choice other than cooperating with Nazi atrocities. Why did the top leaders of the Jewish councils grovel and submit so obediently to authority? Therefore, some believe the main reason Arendt was attacked wasn't her content, but her tone. Her writing was always aggressive, arrogant, domineering, and laced with unnecessary sarcasm. This was hard to accept. For example, she liked using phrases like, "the whole truth is," making her seem to know the truth better than others and understand Eichmann more deeply, which irritated people. Arendt responded to this accusation by denying that she blamed the Jewish people in her book for not rising up in resistance. In a 1964 interview with German journalist Günter Gauss, she said, "If people accuse me of prosecuting Jews, that's a malicious propaganda lie, nothing else. But if it's about the tone, that's just having an issue with me as a person, then I have nothing to say." As for the third controversy about Arendt, she likely never had a chance to respond. That is, with more historical materials uncovered and made public in recent decades, some scholars believe Arendt was deceived by Eichmann. In 2014, German philosopher Bettina Steinmetz published a book titled Eichmann Before Jerusalem. This book collected numerous memoirs and documents Eichmann wrote while hiding in Argentina after the war, proving he was far from the obedient civil servant he claimed during interrogation, but a fervent Nazi devoted to the cause. A.K. Even though more evidence shows the basis for Arendt's banality of evil was unreliable, she was fooled by Eichmann's courtroom performance. But that doesn't mean her ideas aren't important. American historian Christopher Browning thinks there were indeed many like Arendt described in German military and police units. For example, the Nazi doctors documents scientists who went to Auschwitz just to conduct research. They might not have hated Jews, yet indirectly became accomplices in their murder. So, when Eichmann claimed no anti-Semitic tendencies, just following orders, it sounded plausible. It truly represented what some Nazi collaborators thought back then. German historian Hans Mommsen believes Arendt's great contribution was describing Eichmann's psychology and analyzing how totalitarianism shapes such personalities to enable genocide. In her other masterpiece, The Origins of Totalitarianism, Arendt explains how rulers use propaganda and institutions to mold people like Eichmann. Nazis brainwashed Germans with crude slogans through powerful propaganda, destroying independent thought. Eichmann often showed language deficiencies during the trial. He dodged questions, spoke without substance, just parroted slogans. He even apologized in court, saying, "Official language is my only language." Meaning, if you ask me to speak differently, I can't. I only know bureaucratic jargon. He called himself a cog in the machine. One more or less makes no difference. If not me today, someone else tomorrow would do this job. By defining himself as part of an organization, Eichmann tried escaping personal responsibility. This is precisely the banality of evil. So how can people avoid the banality of evil? Arendt believed the solution is thinking, more precisely, reflection. In a speech, she noted that under totalitarianism, people shouldn't rush to take sides or act, but pause to think. What am I actually doing? This reflection should follow Socrates' two moral principles. The first being, it's better to suffer wrong than to do wrong. Second, it's better to conflict with the whole world than to conflict with yourself. He believed that if Eichmann had paused during his active transportation of Jews to ask, "What am I really doing?" he would have seen himself becoming a murderer. If he continued, he'd be condemned to coexist internally with a murderer. This coexistence creates intense inner conflict, causing deep anguish. So to avoid inner turmoil, people might stop evil acts, or at least deliberately miss their targets. What's the situation? During Arendt's fiercest criticism, her doctoral advisor, Karl Jaspers, wrote comforting her, "Someday Jews will build you a monument in Israel." Half a century later, Arendt's exploration of the banality of evil and thinking still challenges human conscience. In her view, contemplating good and evil requires neither education nor IQ, no advanced skills or philosophical knowledge. It demands self-reliant judgment and heeding one's inner voice. A chasm exists between those willing to think and those who refuse. This difference transcends all social, cultural, or educational divides. All right, that concludes our exploration of Eichmann in Jerusalem. Reading notes are below the audio. We'll see you next time. Wait, no,